Hey there, Underground Sessions podcast listeners. Pastor Bob here. So glad you're joining us again, and hopefully you are benefiting from our channel. Make sure you subscribe, like this video if it's beneficial to you. Today we're covering a topic that's near and dear to my own heart. It's the topic of disability. March is Disability Awareness Month, and to join me today to have this conversation, I'm joined by my wife, Amanda, as well as by Rob and Tammy Mittuch. Both of us have walked through seasons where we've and are continuing to walk through seasons where we have disabled children. But if you're touched by disability, we really hope that this connects with you, and if you're not, that this opens your eyes to some very important issues on this important topic. Enjoy this, and we'll see you next time. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the Underground Sessions podcast, and I am excited to have you here with us today. If you haven't met me, my name is Bob Erbig. I am your host, and we cover a lot of topics on the Underground. Sometimes they're theological, sometimes we're getting into cultural issues. Today, this topic is very near and dear to my own heart because I have a son with disabilities, and my family and I have been walking through that. Just to set the stage for our conversation today, I wanted to give a little bit of a definition if you're not aware of what a disability is. So if you just go to this, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control website, they define disability this way. A disability is any condition of the body or mind that makes it more difficult for the person with the condition to do certain activities. So there's a limitation. Certain activities that interact with the world around them. So that's kind of the broad definition of what they give for disabilities. And that can cover a wide variety of things. When people think about disabilities or special needs, you might think about autism, Down syndrome, medical complexities. Both my guests today are going to talk about their children that have medical complexities as well as developmental disabilities. So we're going to get into that and how we can help you there. The other thing I wanted to mention, the reason we're doing this podcast right now is that March is Developmental Disability Awareness Month. Throughout the year, there's different awareness things that pop up on the calendar, but that specifically is what's going on here in March, and that's been in place since 1987, where really as a country, people push each other to think intentionally about how they can help people that have disabilities. So I'm excited for this conversation today. I hope you really benefit from it, and I certainly hope that it is a resource for you. So to aid in the conversation, I am joined by my wonderful wife, Amanda, here in studio. Amanda, say hi to the camera.
Hi to the camera.
So we're going to share a little bit about our story, but also we have some good friends out in the nation of Pennsylvania. They are still in the Union and haven't seceded yet. Rob and Tammy Mittuch, and they're joining us from their own studio over there. Man, you guys look great. I was commenting on Rob's shoes before.
Yeah,
a little
man.
jealous of them.
Erbigs, we're so glad to be on here with you guys. My name's Rob, my wife Tammy, and we're good old friends with you guys. And this has just been fun. We've spent a few minutes getting ready and just seeing your guys' faces and laughing together and just at good old times. Just like we never left. We used to be with you a few years ago at the church together, and now we're
Rob and Tammy used to go to our church. They were our world partners, missionaries that we supported, although Rob got a job at a church, so I guess you're missionary in name only. We don't support you, but we do support Tammy. Yeah. And Tammy, maybe you can say a quick word about the ministry that you have through Family Life.
Yeah, Rob and I together were on staff with Crew, specifically with college students, and when the Lord called Rob to be a pastor, I prayed and asked the Lord what he would have for me next, and he guided me into a family ministry. And so even this topic right now, it's great that I'm still able to focus on families, and families with kids with special needs kind of all can be my, the ministry and my life come together in one. And so thankful that I'm able to still do ministry. But yeah, it's called Family Life.
Yeah, you know, Bob, part of our story and part of the decision making, even for me to leave staff with Crew, has a lot to do with having a disabled child. And so, there's a level of stability being a pastor. And so it wasn't the entire part of the discussion, but for sure, just, with Crew and when we were with missionaries, a lot of travel, moving, decentralized, going different places, and just God allowing me to step into the pastorate brings stability for our whole family, including our disabled son. So disabilities affect the entirety of people's lives. is part
They
of
do,
that.
and that people don't realize they affect the family system. I'm going to kick it over to you guys to talk about your story first, but before we do that, I'm going to give Amanda a chance to say a word about herself.
About myself?
Yeah, well, I mean, so people that are watching, some of you obviously know we're married. I'm the pastor here.
We are married. Let's see,
We're still married, right? We got you were in the ring
Proof.
today. That's
Proof.
great. But a little bit about your background, specifically in the medical field.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I grew up always feeling super comfortable in a hospital. That's really not what people say when they like to be places that make them comfortable. But I knew at a very early young teenager age that I wanted to be in the medical field. So I went to school, got my nursing degree, and I've been a nurse for about 15 years now. I stopped working in buildings when my son was born, Josiah, who you'll hear about later, and I have been working for him as his private nurse thanks to my background and Jesus. And so I've been able to work full-time at home, and that's been an amazing journey. And I've learned probably more than I would have working in a facility because he has so many different unique needs. So I never feel like my job is done, and I continue to learn every day. So yeah.
Well, I mentioned that because I think even back then God was preparing you. You didn't know it yet
Yeah.
to be able to handle some of the medical complexities we've had to come in our lives.
Yeah.
And one of our touch points, not just with Rob and Tammy, is we both work a lot out of Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which we'll mention later, chop connection.
Yeah, we've yet to see them at the hospital. I know they ran into friends before, but we have not crossed paths yet.
Yeah.
But we probably
We'll
won't
have
now
to-
that Trey is almost an adult. But
We'll have to
Well,
plan
he
to-
is aged out, so
Yeah.
we're out of CHOP.
Yeah.
They kicked us
Yeah,
out. So
I know. You
No
get to-
more. Get out of here.
You get to hop next
Wonderful.
door
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
I know.
Well, there's a wonderful connection that people have walked through the same thing, kind of know a little bit about what it's like. So this is hopefully going to be more conversational, and I thought it'd be good if we just open up by sharing a little bit about our stories with how our families have been impacted by disability. So Rob and Tammy, you guys are, since you're in Pennsylvania, I'm going to let you go first, and then we'll go second.
That's nice. Yeah, that's great. Tam, you wanna start it off?
Our story. So Trey, we were married about 4 years when he was born, and as any parent, you're kind of in your mind just expecting that it's going, your desire for your child to be healthy and normal. But even through the pregnancy, you're just praying for your child that they would be healthy and normal. And you're like, I want to make sure I eat all the right things and I do everything to ensure my baby the best possible life they can have. So even starting in pregnancy, just for moms, you think about this, like, I want to eat all the right things so I can have this healthy child. But for us, a month before Trey was born, we went in just for the normal checkup. And when the nurse was doing the ultrasound, they were like, we need to explore this a little more. And we had to then go to the hospital for them to do a little bit more in-depth ultrasound. And they discovered that his heart valve wasn't closing properly. And they were like, no worries. We're going to have the baby delivered. And as soon as he's delivered, the valve is going to close up and then everything is going to be good from there. And we're like, great. Okay, let's have it. Let's make this happen. And so deliver Trey. And then, as we think at that moment for Trey, we think everything is going to be fine. And then a month later, Trey has, he's vomited a little bit. And so we're like, that's normal for a baby. While you're burping your baby, they're just going to, vomit up a little bit of their, milk. And so we just go in for another appointment. And the doctor's like, what? Was this projectile vomiting? And we were like, I think so. I can kind of picture that in my mind. We're thinking nothing of it, but the doctor is alarmed. And she's like, you need to go in for your baby to get another ultrasound for him and for them to check out his stomach. And so when they do, we discover that he has pyloric stenosis, which is a hardening of the muscle in the stomach. And so they're like, no worries, though. We're just going to do this little bit of surgery. We're going to take away some of the muscle and he'll be fine. And so we're like, okay, done. We're good.
That seemed like it was the repeating over and over again. It was like,
You love when
"You'll
doctors
be
act like
fine.
it's-
Here's another thing.
Right.
The
But it'll
doctors
be
act like it's a
okay.
routine thing they're just going to do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Like
no
a-
big deal.
like
No
a
big
one
deal.
and done.
no big
Yeah.
deal.
Yep. And so then at 6 months we go to the doctor and they're like, here's these different milestones. And she's like, put him on the floor. Let me see him sit up. And so I just set him down. So I'm not even aware yet. And he kind of leans forward as opposed to sitting straight up. And so again, it was the doctor who alerts us that, wait, that's not a proper milestone right now. And so as he didn't really have his muscles forming well. And so then they're like, okay, come back. Let's give it a little time. Come back at 1 year. We'll check him again. And so then at 1 year, he's not hitting his milestones. And so we're still envisioning for Trey, oh, well, just, okay, at 1.5, at 2, it's going to be okay.
And even the cardiologist who had,
oh, yeah.
or it was like, oh, he's
Right.
fine. Everyone's always gets
Right.
worried about things. They're different milestones. So you're in this process of,
Oh, wow.
still young and newly married. And we had one daughter already,
Right.
so he's
Right.
our
We did
second.
have a daughter, yep.
And so, everything's going to be fine. You're still hopeful. Everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. But now, all of a sudden, we're going to see a neurologist, right? Getting MRIs done. And
Right, because, he's not hitting his milestones. And so, the neurologist. And then they discover that he is missing his corpus callosum. That's the fibers that connect the right hemisphere of the brain. And so, again, they're telling us, well, everybody's different. You might have this, and some people who are missing their corpus callosum, they don't even know it because they just have a bike accident and they discover they're missing it. So they can be completely normal or they can be in wheelchairs.
Wow.
right, and the report came back,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, this is just a minor malformation.
Oh, my
And so we're like,
God.
a minor malformation. He's missing part of his brain.
Yeah.
What's going on here? But it's still one of those, oh, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. And so, the corpus callosum is the part of the brain that connects the two hemispheres. And it's so, if you don't know much about it, it's kind of like we have two supercomputers, one on one hemisphere is a supercomputer, other hemisphere. And so it's like a normal brain has firewire, like, it's not even firewire now. It's like optics, like what's the optical wire so they could communicate really quickly back and forth. His brain has like a dial-up connection. And so that's really what his main
Right. And we
problem
discovered
was.
with Trey that he was more the end. He's not in a wheelchair, but nothing comes naturally. Everything is hand over hand. And it's amazing when you watch other kids and everything just comes naturally. But for eating, you just have to over and over and over until it just becomes muscle memory because his brain isn't going to, nothing will be natural. So,
Like picture yourself trying to walk around your house in skis all the time. That's what it probably feels like for him. Where
Yeah,
it's like
it's
everything-
exhausting.
everything is hard work. Everything is work.
And then he also has a seizure condition. And so,
that was
after all that rolls out and we're starting to come to terms with it, yet he's still making progress, but slow. There was even one point that his therapist said he had 50 words, given most of them were like B's and D's and M's. Well, at one point he was starting to talk.
At about 4?
Yeah.
4 or 5?
Yeah, but then a seizure condition came on, and it was a real rare one that he was having seizure spikes all night long, and he started regressing.
Oh, wow.
And so he lost all of that. And so now he's
So
nonverbal.
nonverbal.
Yeah, he's still incontinent, but he walks around and he's a joy, and he's relationally.
He can't run. Can't play on play-around equipment, but he can slowly walk. His gait's off, but
Yeah, and so we had years of trying to control it. He was on a ketogenic diet, to control his grand mal seizures and all sorts of medications and all sorts of things. The ketogenic diet, we're not sure if he's small just genetically or if it was the ketogenic diet that stunted his growth. At one point, he got kidney stones and he went into septic shock. And, it's just been a long story. But he's 21 now. And so that's part of our story. So we have our daughter's 23, Trey's 21. Trey's actually Robert III. So
Nice.
that's his nickname, Robert III, Trey. And then we also have a daughter who is 19 now, and
Yep.
she's a freshman in college. So Trey, it's been quite a few years
Yep.
of walking this journey.
Yeah.
That's
So, yeah.
crazy.
Yeah,
I
well,
did
thanks.
not know that in detail. Wow.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's really cool just to appreciate the vulnerability. We'll try to respond in kind. But I think that's important for people that if you have not had somebody in your family or a friend or you yourself experience this, there's often people don't always understand the different challenges that come with that. And not that I would necessarily expect them to understand, but that's partly why we're doing this, to kind of just share a little bit about the story, because it might not be, you might not know us, but you might know somebody that's walking through something like this.
Yeah, Bob, that's so true,
Yeah.
because like even our connection with you guys, we know you don't know exactly what we're experiencing, but you know something very similar. Most
Yeah.
people out there don't. You can't even hardly talk to them about it because they don't know.
They can't
if they-
fathom it.
They can't fathom it,
They
and all
can't.
they want is good news. Like they want to say, "How's Trey doing?" They want you to just be like, "He's healed." That's like what they want to hear, but just to be like, "No, actually, he's regressed, but God's still good."
Yeah.
Yeah.
how to be able to say that. So appreciate you
Yeah.
guys. Appreciate you inviting us just to have this conversation. It's gonna be cathartic, I'm sure, for myself. It's gonna be cathartic.
Good.
Just to talk through it with you guys.
Yeah.
Well, so for our side of the story, we have some similarities in the sense that we also have two daughters, one older and one younger than our middle son.
And our middle son is
Josiah,
the one with special needs.
and he's
just
the one
like
who has
yours.
special needs.
Yep.
Although we did know things earlier on than you guys did, so
We did. Well, we didn't know what he would come out as, but we knew that he had developmental problems. We knew that he had a physical problem. We just had no
Yeah.
idea what it was.
yeah, and our older daughter was born a month early, so we got a little bit of a taste of a
We
few
thought
things.
that was-
you know.
we
that was
thought that
the first
was
month
really
was trying.
bad. Yeah, yeah.
And she wound up being
Which-
perfectly fine, but
yeah. Nobody in the NICU is easy, but
Yeah,
we-
yeah. So
we-
why don't
we
you
thought we were
share,
done.
maybe why don't you kick off a bit of our story?
Sure. So we had 3 miscarriages between our oldest Jenna and Josiah, which was 4 years different, right? They're 4 years apart.
Yes. 3.5. Yeah.
Right. So this one was like, it was pretty random. I don't think that we were trying necessarily. No, we definitely were not. And, we had kind of just given up and was like, whenever God wants, So I found out I was pregnant, and the funny part is, like, we had a woman in our church who was older, but she like really wanted to get to know me before I was pregnant, and she was, she really adored Bob. Her name was Barbara, and she came up to me one day in the lobby, and she was like, "How you doing?" Like, she knew about my miscarriages, and she was like, "God told me that you're going to be pregnant and you're going to have a boy." And I was like, "No, I'm praying for you." And I was like, "All right, that's great." Carried on with my life. 3 months later, I find out I'm pregnant, and that day or 2 days later, I plan to tell her, and she's found like dead from a brain bleed
Oh my
in
gosh.
her home. So like they rush her to the hospital. Her family wants to say goodbye, so she's still on life support. So we go to the hospital, and that's the second time I've seen my husband cry. So it was so surreal, and it was so crazy to me. And we didn't know if it was going to be a boy or a girl at this point. So when we finally found out it was a boy, that was just so. It was just so miraculous. Like I just kind of knew. I was like, okay, whatever is going to happen, this is going to be like something, in the future. God's going to use it, whatever. So we found out the sex before we had our 12-week ultrasound. I think we found out the sex at 10 weeks. 12 weeks we had the ultrasound. His nuchal scan, which is like the 12-week scan for everybody that's pregnant, goes and they measure the back of the neck, right? And his was thick. So like it meant that that the baby had a genetic abnormality. At this point, nobody knows what it is. Nobody knows anything. So of course, like they follow us every month, and I go in for my monthly ultrasounds. And as the baby's growing, like they're saying, he could have this. At one point, they told me he could have like brittle bone disease. And I'm like, oh my God. And so like we take the genetic test for that, and like we don't have it. And so we're like, okay, it's not that. So they're seeing all these images on the screen. Eventually they don't know. Like they know that they can't find all 5 fingers. They know that his femur is bent and shorter than the other one. And as far as what they can see, because you can't see processes in utero, you can only see like the presence of or absence of something. So that's all they told me. So like fast forward to 35 weeks, like usually just, most of my kids, like my placenta was in front, so I couldn't feel a lot of kicks right away. So there was one day where like usually Josiah would kick at night, and he didn't kick at night. And the next morning I wake up and he didn't kick. And so I call my OB and I'm like, hey, he wasn't kicking, like I just feel kind of weird. So they're like, come in. So they do an ultrasound. I can't feel him do anything, but they're like, well, he's kicking on the monitor. Let's go get one more ultrasound. So they come in, and it's like a resident and a doctor, and she's like doing the ultrasound, and she's telling the resident what she's seeing. And she's like, oh, okay, see that fluid on the abdomen and in the brain? And she called it ascites. And as a medical professional, I knew what that was. And I said, did you just tell me that my baby has fluid in his brain? And she's like, yep, he needs to come out right now. And she takes the probe and puts it back on the machine, and everything changes. And I start freaking out, and the OB comes in and he's like, relax, it's going to be okay. I'm going to go deliver this baby real quick, and then I'm going to deliver you. Within 30 minutes, he was out and not screaming, not anything, and completely swollen with fluid, 1.5 pounds of fluid on him. Had pulmonary edema, had a grade 1 brain bleed, and I didn't know if he was going to live or die that day. I passed out in the NICU when I saw him for the first time. So fast forward to like a week later, they didn't even know all of what was going on. When he was born, his cell lines were down, all of them. So he had no white cells, no red cells, no platelets. You could transfuse red cells and platelets. You cannot transfuse white cells. So after a few days, and after they take the intubation out, wow, this is getting me emotional. They tell me that his bone marrow isn't working correctly, that he has some kind of bone marrow failure, and they have to keep giving him blood and platelets. And his immune system is like a quarter of what it needs to be. So we go to a hematologist, we do the genetic testing, we see all the doctors we can see, and the only thing after a few months is a bone marrow transplant. And he was on Neupogen, which is like the drug you give cancer patients to boost their immunity. And if you take that long term, it kills you. So he only had a little bit of time. As the months rolled by, we found out that he has poor stomach emptying. He has gastroparesis. He has severe reflux. He has Pierre-Robin syndrome, which is when you're born with some kind of a cleft palate. His was incomplete, so it's, on the top of his hard palate. It didn't affect the mouth. He can't hear. His ear tubes are way too small, and so we had to wait and wait and wait for certain things about him to come to fruition. The one thing we needed to do right away, and everything else had to be secondary, is get him a bone marrow transplant. So when he was 11 months old, he went to CHOP, and we had an anonymous donor from the database. We tested Jenna, and she wasn't as good of a match. We don't know if we would have used Jenna anyway, but he got a bone marrow transplant in April of 2021. He went through 8 days of chemo. One of them was so bad that you had to take a shower every 2 hours. It was called diatepa because it gets metabolized through your skin. And so it would be like a 3rd degree, like a bad sunburn, like every few hours, unless we washed it off. So he went through quite a lot of things. After the transplant, it was successful. He had a ton of side effects, a ton of secondary things. He had graft versus host disease, so he was on long-term steroids, which made him puffy and gave him sleep apnea. And, it was just one thing after another for a whole year. So after we got the bone marrow situation done, he was healed from that. He's considered, no longer immunocompromised, but now he couldn't eat. He couldn't eat through his G-tube. He kept vomiting every day. He would not really grow. He was the strongest kid we knew, but he just had so many things against him. So over time, we figured out what to do. He was hospitalized 15 to 20 times a year for the first 2 years after he got out. He was hospitalized for almost a year from his bone marrow transplant. Most people are hospitalized for 6 to 8 weeks. And so, now what he's dealing with long term is most likely permanent hearing loss. Conductive hearing loss. So he hears sounds, but they're not clear. So he'll wear like little earbuds that we stick on his forehead for that. He does have a short femur on his right side. It's bent and curved. So he wears a 2-centimeter lift on his right shoe. He doesn't have thumbs, but he did just get a surgical thumb on his left hand. So that's really cool. So we're working with therapy with that. He's getting his cleft revision surgery this year.
And that's the last major surgery that we know of.
Yeah, next to getting a magnet in his skull to wear like those ears, because he doesn't really like the band. Now that we know that it's more permanent than temporary. The ears being
their hearing devices. That
they bypass his middle ear. So like fluid, wax, whatever, small tubes, like it'll just bypass it. So it'll rattle the bone and he can hear just like you would be able to hear like this.
Wow.
Yeah. So after that, yeah, I don't think we were lucky with the leg thing. I thought he was going to need like bone lengthening, and the ortho said, like, honestly, if it's below 2 centimeters or lower, like, we don't do anything with it. It doesn't affect their hips or anything. So we were super thankful for that. I thought he was going to need a chin, a jaw distraction surgery because of his PRO band sequence. His chin's a little bit recessed back in. He didn't need that. So by the grace of God, like, the most difficult things, I mean, I know a bone marrow transplant is difficult, but like after that, he really was able to avoid. So there was a ton of grace in his story. And there still is. I mean, he walks, he almost runs. Like, in terms of looking at a kid.
Almost runs.
Yeah,
he runs all over the place.
They say he doesn't run, and I'm like, have you seen him? But yeah, he walks really fast. But you know, in terms of what he can do, like, all he needs is direction on how to do it his way, and he can do anything.
Yeah.
And
What about cognitively, Amanda?
So cognitively, he is developmentally he's like 2. Cognitively, he's completely fine. The disconnect becomes where physically he wants to do something and or mentally he wants to do something and physically he can't get there. So that's where the disconnect is. There's nothing wrong with him neurologically. And that's what has been apparent so far. Like, there could be things later on. But yeah, I mean, everything under the sun, like, you know, he doesn't have really functioning testicles at all. And, you know, other than that, like, his brain itself, like, there's nothing wrong with it. He can learn and do anything that he can physically do, and so his physical body is just needing to catch up to his brain.
Yeah. So I think that gives a good picture of both our family stories. The only thing I would add, maybe, you know, without getting into too much detail on our story, is it's just there was a lot of unknowns at the beginning, and we didn't know what was going to pan out. And I know for me, I remember going at the beginning for the different ultrasounds. We would go for the ultrasound, and we'd be praying, and, you know, we felt like we got bad news every single time.
Yeah.
And then I was almost numb for a month. You know, and then that was also during COVID too. So that was, it was an interesting thing to navigate through.
It wasn't fun.
When he was born.
Sorry, that was a little more detailed.
But it did, and there was other stories about just navigating the medical complexity. And not everybody that has disabilities has this level of medical complexity.
Sure.
So I like to think that Josiah has special needs, but also there's this medically complex piece that people don't always understand. That adds on top of it, between running the hospital and managing the family stuff. I can't count how many times we had to call 911 in the middle of the night and have people come to our house.
Yeah.
So it adds stressors on the family. And I want to kind of maybe start to shift and talk a little bit about how did your family, I didn't actually put this question on the list, but I thought about it later on. How did these stressors impact your family, your marriage? That's another piece of this. When I think about special needs, especially special needs in the church, a lot of times people think, well, we're going to have a buddy in the kids ministry. And that's good. Like, that's a very good thing. But the way special needs and disabilities impacts the entire of the family moves beyond just kids ministry or teen ministry to care and finances and how that impacts you. So Rob and Tammy, I'd ask you, how did that impact your whole kind of family system?
Yeah. You want to go? You may.
You go.
You know, hey, Bob, have you heard as well, I know it's an autistic, families with kids with autism is like 80% divorce. I'm not sure if there's a number that's
I don't know what
for
the exact thing is,
general.
but every single counselor we've ever been to has always told us.
They say it's like, it's doubled, or it's, you know, like 50% of them, they just end up, they don't stick around.
People,
it's too hard.
families with special needs, the divorce rate is higher. Every counselor we've been to tells us that. I'll be honest, I get kind of tired of hearing that. I'm not sure how helpful that is. It is a reality, but
I don't think they're saying it like, I think they're saying it as if like.
No, I understand, but we hear it a lot, and it is a reality that it does put this extra stressor on the family. I think is what I'm trying to get at, and maybe why Rob's asking me. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, they're definitely, I think for sure. We've only been married once, though. And so we've only gone through this once, so we're not sure what a normal experience would be like. But
I do wonder that sometimes. What would it be like to not?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, you talk about what's it like in somebody else's house compared to, I was like, I don't know. I guess I grew up in my parents' home, and so I got to see that a little bit.
Yeah.
But there certainly additional stresses You guys just, I'm exhausted for you guys thinking through going to the hospital. And I remember those days too. I remember the PTSD of just watching, waiting for him to have a seizure, just being exhausted and the additional weight. But man, having to really take your faith seriously and rely on Jesus on a daily basis, to be gracious with one another, to learn those things, to be more gracious with my wife than anyone else, in the world, just knowing what the pressure, just me feeling the pressure, understanding she's under that same pressure. And so many ways, go ahead.
And it's been great for us to watch our daughters grow up now that ours are 19 and 23, that we've seen them develop and grow and be able to feel comfortable around other special needs kids and to have compassion and to trust in the Lord. And as they've been able to watch us navigate this space, I'm sure that there's a form of imitation that comes from that as they've just watched us walk the journey of difficulties. And they are so good at, one of the struggles when you have a special needs child is even as they get older and we get older, and for other people it's like, oh great, they're 14, we can go out on dates now and they can stay home. But for us, having even an 18-year-old special needs son, that we were like, we don't ever have that privilege, I guess, of one day being able to just the two of us walk out the door and say, hey, let's go. But for our daughters have been so wonderful as like, of course I'll stay home with him tonight. Just either way, it's one of the other daughters who just seems like they've just grown up being, just very willing to help out.
That's so true.
Yeah, no, we resonate with that too. It's hard, like not because of Josiah's medical stuff. It's hard for us just to leave him with anybody. Like there has to be somebody who's trained, they know what they're doing. So it makes date nights. Somebody was just asking me about this yesterday. I said, yeah, it makes date nights hard.
Non-existent.
I mean, we try. Getting away for your anniversary is like 1 year we got to go to a hotel in town. And that almost didn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Don't you guys think having a disabled child is going to go one of two ways in your relationship as husband and wife? It's either going to rip you apart or it's going to bind you together. Like, no other way, that no one else, just how much Tammy and I have in common. Like I heard a guy joking once time, I think it was on Family Feud. He's like, if my wife left me, I'm going to go with her. That sort of thing. And so it's like, I can't survive without Tammy. And like with me and Trey, we got our shtick going. It's the three of us.
Yeah.
And it's a change of mindset, but we just understand each other more than anyone else could possibly.
Yeah.
It's just.
You become like one body with like working limbs,
Well, you become forged in that fire. Nobody else knows what it's like to walk through that, specifically as you do. Because we all have different stories.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. What do you feel like? You started to get into this before, but what do you feel like God has taught you in the midst of this? How have you, and maybe how have you wrestled with Him? I know I've done a lot of wrestling with God over this. Amanda can tell you stories.
You definitely have.
Man, I'd love to shoot it back at Amanda. What is that what are you guys talking about? You started laughing a little bit there. You had something to say, I think.
We all know that Bob is very type A, and he's just, like he's
Bob.
got his goals and he has his like future plans, and God loves to go over there and just knock all the dice down and like just say, I'm sorry, dude, but can you stop building your own kingdom? Because it's just not going to work. So he has a lot of come to Jesus moments. But I think that's his Ebenezer to carry. And that's how God is going to convict his heart over and over, is just like giving him a bulldozer of a big dose of reality. Like, this is not about you and your stuff. Like, yes, I gave you desires. Yes, I gave you talents. Some of those may change. Some of those may not. It doesn't mean that my will is still not the best and perfect good will for you and your life,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we all have different journeys on that. The length of the journey, how long it takes for someone to get to that point, Amanda. Like, for some of us, we get there a little faster, and then for others, whether it's the husband or the wife, it just takes a little longer to get to that point that, oh, this isn't changing. This isn't, either my situation changes or I need to change. And if this situation isn't changing, then I need to change, I need to grow, and just seeking the Lord to do that work in our hearts and minds when we're not able. But
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I got to a point where I was saying to myself, like, this is never going away. None of this is changing.
Yeah.
And then and now I say it a little more out loud to Bob, like, this is never going away. This is not changing anytime soon. So you can either accept it or not, but it's going to be really hard if you don't.
There's a bit of a grieving process with that. So I know there
Yeah.
was somebody we were a couple that we were meeting with early on said something to the extent of you have to grieve the dreams that you lost. Whatever
Yeah.
you think, whatever you thought your life was going to be like, it's not going to be that. Even as simple as things like family vacations. You know, when I took
and
family
there's no
vacations,
timeline for that. Like, nobody said you're going to be done grieving in 2 years.
right.
You know.
But like we just can't pick up our kids and travel across the country. We're just getting to a place where maybe we could go away for a couple nights as a family, all of us together.
In fact, anytime somebody mentions a pool, like, yeah, let's go over to your house, we have a pool, I immediately just get stressed out because I'm like, great, one of us is going to have to be with Josiah, the other one's going to have to be with the other kids in the pool. He's going to want to go out there. I'm going to have to physically fight him back. Like, it's not an enjoyable thing to think about.
And people were
stuff.
legitimately thinking they're being helpful,
Right, of course.
like coming from a good heart.
Yeah.
But that's maybe one thing that people could understand, that if somebody has a situation like this in their family, that stresses you out. And I wouldn't think, I didn't know that,
Right.
So it's helpful.
It is a funny conversation because, like, people not understanding how our families work behind closed doors. Because when we go out, we look like we have everything under control.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
But we do. But it's very different than the under control that most people comprehend and what that looks like. And so, like, we're very fine tuned in how we like run our home and like just making sure that we have stability and making sure. And it's hard to mess with it. We're good, but don't mess with it. Don't think that it's going to happen very quickly and easily.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So
that's a really good point.
have you guys ever heard that? Somebody told me this story early on. Bob, I probably shared it with you early on too. It was like this short story, or I guess it's probably an anecdote is probably the best phrase for it, where it's like having a disabled child is kind of like you're going on a trip to the south of France, or you're going on a trip someplace, beautiful beaches, you're getting on the plane, you packed your bags, you're having this child, you're having a baby, and you're picturing you're going to the south of France, this beautiful beach location that you're going to go sit there under the sun and drink, cocktails and just do the typical vacation on the beach. But then halfway through the flight, over comes the pilot and says, "Welcome to your final destination, Holland." And you're like, wait, I wasn't planning on going to Holland. I was expecting to go to the south of France to go to the beaches. But Holland, you find that you're landing in Holland, which is still a beautiful place. It's just very different than you expected. And so now you have to reorient your thinking. You're like, no, I'm not going to the beach to drink cocktails and play in the ocean. I'm going to Holland, where I'm going to look at windmills
and wear wood
appreciate the
shoes,
tulips.
and there's a lot of water.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's just a reorienting, and that's part of the process of being like, no, God still has a good plan for us, and he intended for us to go to Holland.
Yeah.
And for some reason, that's where he wants us. So it's not changing. You're in Holland. Figure out how to enjoy Holland.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
That's
Anyway.
good. That's good. Well, what would you maybe if we can move into a couple other questions? I think they'll be a little more rapid fire. What would you want other people to know about families with disabilities from your experience? How could you help other folks that are watching?
I would say, even though there might be some complexities, like, don't be afraid to ask the couple to go out for dinner, though. Like, you don't decide for them. Still be like, do you want to go out for dinner? And then let that family figure out how to make it work. Or, just continue to ask them what you can maybe do to do social things. So even if you're just a little nervous, continue to, by faith, maybe take a step toward them, and whether it's socially or even maybe to help out in some way, shape, or form. But even if you're a little nervous and not sure what to do, give it a shot.
I love it when other people know that they have permission to love on Trey and to you know, interact with them. And if they invite us out to be like, you know, hey, you want to bring Trey? Trey's great. Bring him along. He could come join you, because from now on, especially when we're, what are we calling ourselves? Trempty nesters? We're never going to be quite empty nesters, but we're like the three of us.
That's cute.
And so it's kind of a combined package. And so for people to know, hey, yes, invite us. We want to go out. We're still normal people. We just have a little bit of extra baggage going on. And so it might take us another minute, or it might look a little bit differently, what socialization looks like.
Yeah.
But yeah.
We've had some it's been really nice for friends who have been like, bring Trey. We'd love to have Trey come. So we've had that. But then also we appreciate it when it's just the two of us, and then we just have to find a babysitter. We figure that out, but we appreciate both of them.
I love it too that Trey gives me a reason to like go to bed at night where I could say no. Where I'm just like sometimes like, I'm sorry, I gotta take
get
care of
home,
myself.
put him to bed.
Yeah.
Spoken like an old man. We go to bed early now.
Totally an old man.
That's right.
Totally an old man.
Yeah. What would you say?
Funny.
Oh, sorry. Tell me the question, because I had
So
one.
what would you want other folks to know about families with disabilities in the family system?
I don't know, like to not walk on eggshells with us. Like we're real people, and we're no different than other people. Like, I mean, to me, disabled people are like a physical representation of our spiritual brokenness. Like we're all broken. We all need somebody to mend our heart. And the disabled population is just a physical reminder that this isn't our home and that we're all imperfect people, physical or otherwise. And so to just like not walk on eggshells, like don't be afraid to ask tough questions. We're not going to yell at you or get upset or offended when you ask the wrong thing or try to learn something and it's just not the right way. Like we will be happy to show you how to, love on like Tammy and Rob are saying, or, just have a relationship with them. Like they're all people. Like they're not a different species. They're all human beings.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and the thing that I would add to that is that people with disabilities offer beauty in the world, and a lot of times, in different governmental systems, there is a concerted effort to end disabilities through things like abortion and kind of mitigating that. But if you read the scriptures, the two passages I've meditated on quite a bit recently are Luke 14. Where Jesus is talking about bringing in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. And then 2 Samuel 9, where David is looking for somebody in Jonathan's family to show kindness to, and he specifically brings up his son Mephibosheth, who is lame in the walk. He's lame with his foot. So he's got some kind of disability there. So it's all over the Bible in terms of when you actually start to look at that and see that God is showing kindness to those who are weaker. And Josiah, like, we've been through a lot of stuff, but he's a happy kid. Like if I went through the stuff that he went through, I'm not sure I'd smile and laugh and as much as he does.
yeah. And they don't know any different. Like they don't know they're disabled. They just know, I mean, some may know more than others, but like, they're not looking at it as if they're less than. Like they just know that they have to do things differently. My favorite Bible verse, and we've talked about it since we were pregnant with Josiah, is John 9, where Jesus heals the man born blind, and these people in the streets are saying, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" And the Bible says, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life." Like, how can you work to eliminate an entire group of people that are designed to show God's power and grace and mercy? It's
good.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with God showing his glory and his beauty and his wonder and awesomeness through this. I had a moment when we were living in New Jersey, going to Millington, and there was this one night that I just sensed the Lord was telling me that he wanted me to just wake up at 3 a.m, open up my Bible and go spend time with him. And so I was like, okay, let me just go sit out there and, all right, Lord, what do you have to say to me? So I thought, well, let me just open up my Bible. It's kind of like that Bible roulette and let it just plop open. And it was such a God moment because the Lord absolutely, it plopped open to Isaiah 44, 45, and 46. And it was as if the Lord was speaking directly to me from his word. And I can't even recreate that now if I read Isaiah. But in that moment at 3 o'clock in the morning when I popped it open, if you see in there, it just repeats over and over. And he says, I created, I created, I created. And so when Trey was 3 years old, the Lord was like, Tammy, this wasn't from you. It wasn't something you did when you were pregnant, that you ate something wrong. This was me and my beauty and my purpose and my plan that is perfect, that I created Trey with this. He is perfectly and wonderfully made. And so, yeah, God is so awesome. And he has absolutely shown up in that way. And I think one of the amazing things that God has done for me through this experience has really got me to focus on eternity. That I can't really spend my time focusing on this temporal world. Like, absolutely, we live here and you need to. But because of Trey, there's so much that I'm like, I cannot wait for that day when we all get to heaven and I get to hear him talk for the first time. I cannot wait for the first time I get to see him run. And so I think it's recalibrated my brain to focus a little bit more on eternity and living today for eternity. And so it's not only my relationship with Trey, but it influences all of me and my ministry and my relationships with people, that I have more of an eternal perspective based on my relationship with Trey and how the Lord designed him and created him.
That's good. Hey, Rob, I just, as she was talking, I just thought of something. So we did a series through Revelation in the fall, and I was thinking a lot about the new heavens and the new earth and resurrected bodies and things like that. In one of our conversations, you were talking about kind of how you were going down this healing journey, and you said something that has always kind of stuck with me. It was something to the extent that, if God healed my son or completely took away his disabilities, then I'd have a different son, or something to that extent. And that was something you wrestled with God about. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe you can say a little bit about that. I just found that to be super meaningful to me.
Yeah, it was from another friend of mine as well. It was a friend of mine who said that to me, just about his daughter, who's just slightly, delayed in some ways, but she's fully functioning. And it was a conversation with his mother. And his mother was like, we got to pray over her to heal her. And he's like, hold on a second, Mom. You understand what you're saying, is that you're praying that I would have a different daughter. And so, man, there's a whole bunch. What I'll speak into this is just learning to live in the tensions of emotions are very complicated. And so on one hand, I could know that, this isn't perfectly, this world is broken. And yes, my son, regressed from seizures. I don't think seizures were in God's original plan, his good plan in the garden, but still loving my son and never wanting him to change. Just being able to be more like emotionally whole, knowing that I can live in that tension and yet still trusting God. That's the biggest, man. I tell you what, the biggest idea, I remember feeling like trusting God, and he's the one who's stabbing me in the back, something that I wanted so desperately and seemed pretty normal to be like, hey, I expect to have a normal son. He's my only son. He's my namesake. And I'm like, I don't think I'm asking too much. But then when God doesn't give that to me, where it's really struggling through the goodness of God and living in that tension and being able to really coming to that point, that's a good place to come to in life and spiritually, where you're like, I have no other choice because I cannot understand this. I cannot understand how my son turned out with a disability, yet I'm still going to trust that God is good. He's still loving. He understands the suffering, and that one day all things are going to be made right. So even with my son not praying, I don't know how to pray. I don't know how to pray for him. I'm praying just that God would take him and do what God wants with him, because if God chose, God still could open up my son's mouth today. And Trey could start talking. Today, God could choose that my son would be potty trained today. He could. Do I know if I'm praying for that or not? I don't actually know. I'm just praying and looking to God to his goodness. I'm praying for Trey's best. But, it's not one of these like genies in the bottles, beware what you pray for. You're going to get what you ask, not ask. No, that's not how God works. God's a good God. I'm going to pray for my son. But ultimately just breaking that, having that cancer in my heart where I'm trying to be in control, trying to get everything that I want out of life, but just being forced by God. That's what God taught me through Trey. Forcing me to give control over to God and allowing him to do what he wants with life, but still knowing that God is good and still knowing that God loves me and that God loves Trey, God loves my wife. And so, yeah, it's a funny tension.
Yeah, you have to hold them both together.
It's funny tension.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going through 2 Corinthians right now, and one of the main themes in 2 Corinthians is strength through weakness. 2 Corinthians 12 is where Paul has that, that challenge with the thorn in the flesh, and that's where he says, my grace is sufficient for you, my power is made perfect in weakness. And verse 10 of chapter 12, he says, that's why for Christ's sake I delight in weaknesses and insults and hardships and persecutions and difficulties, for when I am weak, then I am strong. And one of the things I think God teaches us through our kids is the idea that just because it seems like you're weak doesn't mean that you are, and your strength ultimately comes from the Lord. So that's been a good thing to learn.
Yeah.
Well, we're kind of oh, sorry, were you going to say something?
No, just agreeing with you, Bob. That's a good word, dude. It's a good word.
Well, as we're kind of maybe wrapping up here, I thought at the end it would be good to maybe offer some resources. If you're somebody who's listening to this and you've walked through this with somebody, or somebody who's walking through this, what are some resources that we would recommend to people in this situation? Yes,
looks
I see
like
that
your
hand.
wife has a resource.
She's raising her hand. She's right next to me.
Raising her hand on a podcast.
Not very many people are online, but like if you have Facebook, like find.
Did you not many people are online?
No,
is that what you said?
I am working it out as I am
when are you
talking.
living?
Stop it. If you are on Facebook and you are seeking, just other people, like-minded people that have similar situations, there are 1,000 groups out there that are good, wholesome, solid groups that even in comments will mention organizations, resources. It's like a never-ending circle of whatever you need. I mean, sometimes I literally, I didn't know where I was going to get Josiah's glasses. And I was like, where do you get your glasses? Like, we have this insurance, and there's 8 comments. So, I mean, there's New Jersey special needs if you're in the state of New Jersey. There are recycle groups for adaptive equipment. There's utilize your case managers and your insurance, your social workers, the hospital social workers. I can't tell you how many times we've received grants because a hospital social worker filled out our form on our behalf. Friends that that know about your situation, don't think that they're not going to go and volunteer your name into some pot where people give away periodic, financial gifts, because that's happened to us too. And you don't have to be anybody important. So there are tons of resources. You just have to keep digging. There's a case manager for pretty much every organization that's federally funded. So if you're in Medicaid, there's a case manager for you. If you're in the hospital, there's a case manager for you. If you are, in Perform Care, anything like that, there's so many things out there. New Jersey Catastrophic Relief, they give tons of money away for people that exceed 10% of their income per year, with medical costs, medical things. So, I'm sure in other sides, autism and things like that, there's other groups like that too. But literally I've got, I think 4 or 5 groups I'm a part of, and I've received 2 or 3 medical equipments. I've received an extra feeding pump that we use on the regular. There's places where you can have, extra supplies that you need, whatever. It's never ending. I mean, all you have to do is really just open up your phone or computer, start opening your mouth to people, and I swear it'll get back to you. It's not that hard to find if you limit yourself to looking on the internet, maybe. But if you start talking to people and joining forces with other families, I guarantee you there's always something out there.
What about you guys? You got any resources for us?
One of the ones that you and I both got a lot out of was when we were newly married, but it came into play as we had Trey, was Henry Cloud's Changes That Heal. And one of them that came from that was, of his 4 different things he talks about, was good, bad, split. And he talks about in there that the Lord doesn't have things all good and all bad. It's a combination of both. And so whether you think about yourself that you're all bad, or you think about somebody else, they are all bad or all good, but even your situation. And so in that, it wasn't that our situation with Trey was all bad. There's a combination of both. And I think just going through the Changes That Heal book with Henry Cloud, those resources has been really helpful for us to have that balanced view of the situation, that there can be both. It is, it isn't the life you're looking for, but in that you do weave in the beautiful good things that God has for you through that journey.
Yeah.
That's good. Bob, it's funny because I've had people give me books about being a parent of, a child with a disability, and I've never read them. It's just something I can't hardly come to do. I don't want to read a book on it. It's difficult. And so there's plenty of other good godly books that have really, made a difference in my life and my view of God and my view of my son. Amanda, I will say this too, by the way. You saying that about the practical, how do you navigate, practically speaking, financially and legally, and going, becoming his legal guardian and Social Security and all those things. There's plenty of people out there who can help you with that, but it is complicated. There's a lot of complicated pieces that I'm I know too much about this now that I don't want to know about, but I have to. You have to know how to do this waiver system, and now Trey's getting out of school. He's no longer going to be in public school, so now we're entering into a whole different world. That's where the support needs are, and so thankfully God's blessed us with plenty of case managers and good people.
Yeah, I don't know where I'd be without case managers.
I know. You got to use them.
They just know everything. They're like the squeaky wheel that you can't be.
Yeah.
They go into the middle of the line and they just maneuver their way through things.
Yeah.
And they just do it.
Right. And you got to use all their resources and stay on top of things and not get emotionally overwhelmed. I could get emotionally overwhelmed because I don't want to have to deal with these things, but you need support.
Yeah.
You need support if you're going to survive.
Throughout time, you develop this secondary team, your team at the hospital, your team in your insurance, and eventually you go from you doing it all to these people doing this part and these people doing this part, and you're just constantly circulating through those people, and that's when it becomes something that you can live with versus something that you're just surviving. Another thing I will say that I really liked is a book called Prayer in the Night, and my phone won't let me get in right now, but it's by Trish Harrison Warren, and it's kind of a liturgical type of book, but it's about just prayers that for those who work or watch or weep. So at night, you are constantly staying awake, right? And staying watchful and working for the next thing, or staying, vigilant, even in your sleep, for anything that could happen, screaming, whatever. But it's where does your mind go at night? Are you walking through your suffering at night with the Lord, or are you just shutting off and thinking that you're alone? So I really liked that book. It was really encouraging for me to just know that it's okay to be in a really dark place and pray that God would just keep watch, that God would keep watch over my heart and over the people that I love's heart, and the very, difficult road we have with our son and with your son, that things are still, there's still somebody looking out for you,
The book I'd throw out there too. Thank you, man. That's a good one. The one that it's called A Million Ways to Die.
Oh, I've heard that.
And have you really heard of it?
I've heard of it. Yeah, I haven't read it, but I've heard it.
Yes, and it was one of those, and maybe it was just the season I was in, but I think it's maybe more than that, because it's not about disabilities. It's really just about the importance as a Christian to coming to terms with when life doesn't go the way you want it to go, and how just giving up control and just being the type of person who walks by faith and isn't shaken when things just that you dearly love and dearly want to have happen don't.
Yeah.
Giving up control. And so that was a big deal in my life. It was a significant season of, growth and development as it comes to terms with going through that grief process with Trey. And so it was probably one of the last and one of the most significant seasons of cycles of processing who God is and how this world works. Your whole worldview has to change.
Yeah, it really does.
Like my immature view of Christ and Christianity had to completely change in order to incorporate having a disabled son.
Yeah, because you got to live a life of surrender now. Like people talk about it, but you really do have to live a life of surrender, and as real as it gets. You can't just say it. You literally have to just be like, okay.
Yep, 100%.
Well, I would just add 2 organizations that I've come across. Johnny and Friends is probably the one that's best known about for dealing with disabilities and disability ministry. Also, there's a ministry I came across recently called Key Ministry, keyministry.org, and a lot of resources, especially on the medical front. The guy who runs it, I heard at a conference recently, and he was a medical professional. So Johnny and Friends, Key Ministry. And the one book I would recommend is a book called Same Lake, Different Boat by Stephanie Hubach. And that one I thought helped me get a really good sense of a biblical view on how to think about disability from a Christian worldview perspective. So those are all very helpful to me. Well, Rob and Tammy, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate you sharing your hearts, your story. Lots of really good insights. Amanda, come back anytime.
Oh, thanks. I'm just
Bob,
right
thank
across
you.
the pond.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us. It's cathartic,
Yeah,
really.
it's really good
Just
to talk to you guys.
talk through it.
Can you define
Amanda, even
cathartic?
just
That sounds bad.
cathartic, man. It's like visceral, and
Cathartic.
it makes me feel good on the inside, and like
Yeah.
tends to my soul just to be able to talk through these things with good friends who understand, and just even some things that came out as we were processing. I'm like, yeah, God's used our disabled son to teach us a ton.
It's nice to get validation from another couple and another friends. Yeah.
And to strengthen our marriage and to minister to others and for, just to keep our eyes set on eternity. Man, what a gift, right?
Yeah.
What a gift to have those things. And so thank you guys for having us.
Thanks for being here.
And if you were watching, we hope this was a blessing and helpful to you. Send us some comments. Let us know if there's some follow-up questions. We can interact with you. And we do hope to see you next time on the Underground Sessions podcast.